so today we're going to be learning about quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is another way to factor. It's used for really when quadratic equations are not factorable, but you can use it for any quadratic equation no matter if it's factorable or not. So it's just another method. Now, quadratic formula. So just write on your notes, quadratic formula. This marker's running out. Okay. Quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? So it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? I want you to write this down. The opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's quadratic formula. Okay. Now there's a song for this that I learned when I was in Algebra 2, and I have never forgotten the formula since. So when I was 15, so going back over 10 years ago, I learned this and I have never forgotten it. Okay, so this is how it goes. It goes along to the Pop Goes the Weasel song. The opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's quadratic formula. Okay, I know, super corny, but you will never forget this. If you memorize that song, you won't ever forget it. So, our first example, okay, is m squared minus 5m minus 14 equals 0. Now, this isn't like completing the square where you have to move over the constant. You keep the constant over here, okay? So, x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's quadratic formula. Okay, so x equals the opposite of b. Okay, so we have ax squared plus bx plus c. The opposite of b, the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 5 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, you could write a 1 here if that helps you, c, which is negative 14, all over 2a, which is 1. Okay, so this is where you should be right now. Next step is we start simplifying. X equals 5 plus or minus, negative 5 squared is 25, minus 4, negative 4 times 1 times negative 14 is positive 56. Over 2. Next, x equals 5 plus or minus 25 plus 56 is 81, so radical 81 over 2. X equals 5 plus or minus 9, because the square root of 81 is 9 over 2. And x equals 5 plus 9 over 2. So that's x equals 5 plus 9 is 14, divided by 2 is 7. Our other solution is x equals 5 minus 9 over 2. So x equals negative 4 over 2, which is negative 2. So your two solutions are x equals 7, and x equals negative 2. Okay, next example. Let me make sure I'm in frame here when I'm writing over there. Yes, I am. Okay. All right, next, number 2. B squared minus 4b plus 4 equals 0. Quadratic formula is x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's quadratic formula. Okay, so first step, the opposite of b is positive 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 4 squared, minus 4, a is 1, c, all over 2 times 1, 2a, x equals 4 plus or minus square root of negative 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16, so 16 minus 16 over 2. X equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. X equals 4 plus or minus radical 0. That's just 0. So really what we have is, we just have 4 over 2 now. And 4 over 2 is just 2. So x equals 2 is our only solution there. Okay. Next one. Number 3. 2m squared plus 2m minus 12 equals 0. So even though our leading coefficient is not 1, it doesn't matter, it's still the same process. So the opposite, x equals the opposite of b. Opposite of b is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 2 squared, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, next step, x equals negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared is 4 minus, this is actually going to turn to a plus because we have negative negative, so plus 4 times 2 is 8 times 12 is 96 all over 4. X equals negative 2 plus or minus radical 100 over 4. X equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 100 is 10 over 4. X equals negative 2 plus 10 over 4. Negative 10 plus 10 over 4. So negative 2 plus 10 is positive 8 divided by 4 is 2. And then your other solution is x equals negative 2 minus 10 over 4. So x equals, that's negative 12 divided by 4, which is negative 3. So your two solutions are x equals 3 and x equals negative 3 and x equals 2. Okay. Final example. Number 8 on your worksheet, 2m squared minus 7m minus 13 equals negative 10. So when you are doing quadratic formula, you have to make sure it's set equal to 0. So we have to move this 10 over to get it set equal to 0. So we're going to add 10. So now we have 2m squared minus 7m minus 3 equals 0. And now we're ready to plug right into quadratic formula. So x equals the opposite of b, so that's positive 7, plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 AC, so 2 and negative 3, all over 2a, so 2 times 2. X equals 7 plus or minus the square root. Negative 7 squared is 49. 4 times 2 is 8, times negative 3 is negative 24, and then there's 2 negatives, so it's a positive 24, over 2 times 2 is 4. X equals 7 plus or minus 49 plus 24 is 73 over 4. We can't do anything with radical 73, so we're just going to keep it as x equals 7 plus radical 73 over 4. That's our first solution. And then x equals 7 minus radical 73 over 4. That's our second solution. Okay, so those are your solutions. And that is it. That is quadratic formula. Bye.